The Dawn of Your Best Self by Jordan Blake. Chapter 1: The Weight of Doubt. Maya sat by the window of her small apartment, the soft hum of the city outside barely reaching her ears. It was a Thursday morning, but it felt like just another day in a long stretch of them. The world seemed to be moving in fast forward, while she was stuck in a loop of uncertainty. Her coffee sat cold on the table, forgotten as her mind drifted. She had always been a dreamer, filled with hopes of something greater than the quiet life she had come to know. But lately, the dreams had become distant, like stars far beyond her reach. Each morning, she woke up with the same sense of heaviness, the same doubts clawing at her chest. Was she meant for something more, or was this all she was ever going to be? The question lingered in her mind like an unsolved riddle, one she couldn't escape. She'd spent years trying to build a life, trying to fit into a world that seemed to have a set place for everyone except her. Maya had always thought she could rise above her insecurities, push past the fear that held her back. But each attempt felt like a small victory followed by a bigger setback. The doubts never left, and slowly, they started to shape the way she viewed herself. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Emma, her best friend since childhood. "Hey, Maya. Are you still coming to the workshop today? It could be exactly what you need." Maya stared at the screen for a moment. Emma had always been the optimistic one, the one who believed in self-growth and pushing through barriers. She had been talking about this self-discovery workshop for weeks now. Maya had been hesitant, unsure of what it could offer her. But Emma was persistent, always encouraging her to take chances, to step outside her comfort zone. Maya typed a quick reply, her fingers hovering over the keys. "I don't know, Emma. I'm not sure if I'm ready for something like that." The response came almost immediately. "That's exactly why you need to go. Trust me, you'll feel so much better once you take the first step. I'll be there to support you." Maya hesitated. There was a part of her that wanted to believe Emma, to trust that this workshop could be the answer she had been searching for. But another part of her was afraid of the unknown and the potential disappointment if things didn't go as expected. She took a deep breath and stood up, walking to the small mirror by the door. Her reflection stared back at her tired eyes, hair pulled into a loose bun, and a face that had seen too many days of self-doubt. Maya had always been her harshest critic. Every mistake, every failure, she blamed herself for it, as if she wasn't deserving of success or happiness. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, something shifted. She realized that she had been letting fear dictate her life for far too long. Maybe it was time to try something different, to take a step forward, even if it was just a small one. With a final deep breath, Maya grabbed her coat and phone, and with a quiet determination, she left the apartment. The workshop was held in a modest community center on the edge of town, a place she had passed by countless times without giving it a second thought. As Maya approached the entrance, she felt the familiar knots of anxiety tighten in her stomach. But this time, there was a flicker of something else. Hope. Emma was waiting for her inside, a bright smile on her face as she waved Maya over. "You made it," she exclaimed, pulling her into a warm hug. "I almost didn't," Maya admitted with a nervous laugh. "But I'm here now." "Good," Emma said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. This is going to be the start of something amazing for you, I just know it. Maya nodded, still unsure of what to expect. The room was filled with a mix of people, all sitting in small groups, chatting quietly. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, but it didn't fully erase the unease she felt inside. As the session began, the instructor, a woman named Sarah, stood at the front of the room. She had an easygoing demeanor, her voice calm and reassuring. Welcome, everyone. I know that each of you is here for different reasons, but you all share one thing in common: the desire to make a change in your life. Maya glanced around, noticing the various expressions on the faces of the other participants. Some seemed confident, others unsure, much like herself. The idea of change, of stepping into a new version of herself, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Could she really do it? Could she truly overcome the doubts that had plagued her for years? As the workshop progressed, Maya listened intently. Sarah spoke about the importance of self-awareness, of recognizing the patterns in our lives that hold us back. She talked about how we often limit ourselves with negative beliefs, and how those beliefs can be changed if we are willing to put in the effort. Maya's mind buzzed with the information, but there was still a part of her that struggled to believe it could apply to her. The afternoon session focused on identifying personal goals and breaking them down into smaller, achievable steps. Maya had always struggled with setting goals, afraid of setting herself up for failure. But today, she decided to try it. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining what it would feel like to live a life without the weight of self-doubt. What would it be like to wake up each day with a sense of purpose, knowing exactly where she was headed? The vision felt distant but not impossible. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine the possibility of a life that wasn't ruled by fear. By the end of the workshop, Maya felt a spark of something new inside her. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a beginning. She had taken the first step, and that in itself was a victory. As she walked out of the community center with Emma, she felt lighter, like the burden she had been carrying was starting to lift, even if just a little. See? I told you, Emma said, grinning. I knew you could do it. Maya smiled, a genuine smile that had been missing for a long time. Maybe you were right, she admitted softly. Maybe this is just the start of something better. As she walked into the fading sunlight, she realized that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she was willing to face it. The journey to her best self had only just begun. Chapter 2: The Road Less Traveled. Maya woke up the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose, the quiet hum of her alarm clock filling the room as sunlight streamed through her window. The events of the previous day still lingered in her mind: the workshop, the discussions, and the realization that perhaps change was within her grasp. She stretched, feeling a strange warmth in her chest as she thought about the small steps she had taken. It wasn't much, but it was something. She hadn't expected the workshop to make such an impact. Maya had gone in with skepticism, unsure of how anything could shift after years of feeling stuck. But now, there was a quiet voice inside her, urging her to keep going. To trust the process, even if it felt uncomfortable. Change wasn't going to happen overnight, but the key was to start, even if it was with small actions. The day ahead seemed ordinary at first, a normal workday at the local bookstore where she had been employed for the last 3 years. But there was a shift in her mindset. As she made her morning coffee, she thought about the goal-setting exercises from the workshop. She remembered Sarah's words about breaking down big goals into smaller, manageable steps. Maybe it was time to take a closer look at her life and figure out what she really wanted. Maya glanced at her phone and saw a message from Emma. "How are you feeling today? Ready to take on the world?" Maya smiled, appreciating Emma's unwavering optimism. She typed back, "It feels like a new day. I'm not sure what comes next, but I'm willing to find out." That's the spirit. Baby steps, remember. You've got this. Maya set her phone down and took a deep breath. She wasn't exactly sure what her first step would be, but there was something empowering about admitting that she was ready for something more. The bookstore was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound as Maya sorted through the morning deliveries. She worked in the back, organizing new stock and preparing books for the shelves. It was a solitary space, one that allowed her time to think without distraction. But today, her thoughts weren't filled with doubts and self-criticism as they often were. Instead, she considered the idea of pursuing a new passion. What if she could start writing? She'd always loved the idea of storytelling, but fear had held her back for so long. What if her words could inspire someone else the way Emma's optimism inspired her? The thought lingered in her mind, and for the first time, she didn't push it away. Writing had always felt like a distant dream, something she was too afraid to explore. But now, it didn't feel like an impossible task, it felt like a challenge. And maybe, just maybe, she could rise to meet it. Maya pulled out a notebook from the shelf and began to scribble down ideas, fragments of stories, thoughts, and dreams. She didn't care if they didn't make sense or if they weren't perfect. She just needed to write. And as she did, the doubt she had carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of purpose. Hours passed, and the day slipped into evening. The bookstore was quiet, the only sound being the soft rustle of pages as Maya worked. She was lost in the flow of her thoughts, in the stories she was weaving. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about what she lacked or the mistakes she had made. She was simply creating, and in that moment, it felt right. When Maya arrived home that night, she felt a quiet exhaustion, but it was the good kind, the kind that came from doing something meaningful. She took a quick shower, then sat down at her small desk, pulling out her notebook once more. Her mind was buzzing with ideas, and for the first time, she didn't feel the need to silence them. As she wrote, she thought about the fears that had once paralyzed her. What had held her back from pursuing her dreams? Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of not living up to the expectations others had set for her. But those fears were just that, fears. They were not the reality she had to live by. She paused, pen in hand, and glanced at the words she had written. They weren't perfect, but they were hers. And for the first time, that was enough. She could feel the weight of self-doubt slowly lifting, replaced by a quiet confidence that she hadn't known existed within her. The next morning, Maya woke up with a new sense of determination. She had already written more than she had in months, and the thought of continuing to write excited her. But she also knew that there was more work to be done, more steps to take in her journey of self-discovery. Writing was just one part of it. Maya had always been afraid to embrace her potential, afraid that she wouldn't measure up or that the world wouldn't accept her as she was. But now, she understood that the journey wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, every day, and doing the work. Whether it was writing, building new relationships, or confronting her deepest fears, she knew that the only way forward was to take it one step at a time. At work that afternoon, Maya was organizing a section of self-help books when a customer approached her. He was an older man, his gray hair neatly combed, his eyes kind but tired. He glanced at the books she was shelving and then turned to her with a smile. "You know," he said gently, "sometimes we just need a little push to remind us that we're capable of more than we think." Maya blinked, surprised by the stranger's insight. "What do you mean?" He chuckled softly. "I've spent my life thinking I couldn't do certain things, writing, starting new ventures, even finding peace with my own past. But eventually, I realized that the only limits are the ones we place on ourselves. Don't let fear be the reason you never try." Maya's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the universe had sent her a reminder, exactly when she needed it. "Thank you," she said quietly, the weight of his words sinking in. He smiled and gave her a small nod. "You're welcome. Just remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Just keep moving forward." As he left the store, Maya felt a renewed sense of clarity. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she didn't have to face it alone. Every small step she took, every act of courage, would bring her closer to the person she was meant to be. She looked down at the notebook in her hands and smiled, knowing that with each word she wrote, she was rewriting her own story. Chapter 3: Embracing Change. The days that followed felt like a blur of small victories and new realizations. Maya had taken to writing every morning before work, using the time to pour her thoughts onto paper, without judgment, without expectation. At first, it felt foreign, awkward, even, but soon, the act of writing became a refuge. It was a place where she could explore her feelings, confront her fears, and let go of the perfectionism that had haunted her for so long. But as her writing began to flourish, so did the other areas of her life. The more she embraced her creative side, the more she noticed subtle shifts in the way she interacted with the world. There was a new sense of confidence in her step, a quiet assurance that had been missing for years. Yet, despite these changes, the journey was far from easy. Every day, new challenges arose, testing her resolve. The doubts still crept in, sometimes at the most unexpected moments. The voice in her head, the one that told her she wasn't good enough or that success was out of reach, still lingered like a shadow. But now, Maya knew how to silence it, at least for a while. She had learned that overcoming self-doubt wasn't about eliminating it completely, it was about acknowledging it, accepting it, and moving forward despite it. It was a Wednesday evening when Maya found herself standing outside a local cafe, the familiar sound of bustling conversation filling the air. She had agreed to meet Emma for coffee, to catch up and share how things were going since the workshop. Maya had been hesitant at first, unsure of how to explain the subtle changes she was experiencing. But she knew Emma would understand. As she stepped inside, Emma waved from a corner booth, her smile wide and inviting. "Maya! Over here!" Maya made her way over, taking a seat across from her friend. Emma wasted no time in diving into the conversation. "So, how's everything been going? Any breakthroughs since the workshop?" Maya paused, thinking for a moment. She had so much to share, but words felt inadequate to express the depth of the changes that were unfolding inside her. "I've been writing," Maya said, her voice tinged with a sense of surprise, even to herself. "Every morning before work. It feels like something I've always wanted to do but was too afraid to try." Emma's eyes lit up. "That's amazing, Maya. I knew you had it in you." Maya smiled, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't expected. "It's been really freeing. I don't worry about making it perfect anymore. I just write. And it feels like I'm finally being honest with myself. That's the key, isn't it?" Emma said, her voice soft but certain. "The fear of not being perfect can hold us back from doing anything at all. But once you let go of that fear, you realize that the process itself is the reward." Maya nodded, the truth of Emma's words resonating deeply with her. She had spent so much time chasing perfection that she had almost forgotten why she started in the first place: to express herself, to create, to share a piece of her soul with the world. "I've also been thinking a lot about what comes next," Maya continued. "Like, what am I really working towards? What do I want my life to look like?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "That's a big question. Have you come to any conclusions?" Maya shrugged. "Not yet, but I feel like I'm getting closer. I've started to think that maybe writing is more than just a hobby for me. Maybe it's something I want to pursue seriously, but I'm not sure how to take the next step." Emma leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Maya, that's incredible. You already have the most important part figured out, the desire. The rest will follow. It's just about taking the next step, however small it might be." Maya thought about this as she sipped her coffee, the warmth of the drink grounding her in the moment. The idea of turning her writing into something more, something tangible, something real, felt like a dream, one that was just out of reach. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it might be possible. The fear of failure still lingered, but it no longer held her captive. "I guess the next step is just starting," Maya said softly. "I've been holding myself back for so long, thinking I wasn't ready. But maybe I'll never feel ready. Maybe I just need to trust that I am." The following weekend, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She enrolled in a local writing class, something she had hesitated to do for years. The thought of putting herself out there, of sharing her work with others, filled her with anxiety. But she knew that if she didn't take this step now, she might never take it at all. The first class was nerve-wracking. The small room was filled with aspiring writers, each one nervously clutching their notebooks. Maya took a deep breath as the instructor introduced herself, a middle-aged woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. "Welcome, everyone," the instructor said, her voice calm and welcoming. This is a place for creativity, for exploration, and for growth. There are no right or wrong ways to express yourself here. We're all on this journey together. As the class began, Maya listened intently, soaking in every word. The exercises were simple but effective, designed to free the mind and allow creativity to flow without restraint. Maya wrote with a sense of abandon, her pen moving across the page faster than she thought possible. It wasn't about writing something perfect, it was about writing, period. By the end of the class, Maya felt something shift inside her. She had pushed through her fear, taken the leap, and had survived. In fact, she had thrived. The doubts were still there, but they didn't hold as much power over her anymore. That night, as Maya sat at her desk, she looked at the notebook in front of her, the pages filled with words and ideas. She had taken another step, another small but significant step towards her best self. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was that she was moving forward. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see a message from Emma. "How was the class? Did you take the plunge?" Maya smiled, typing back, "I did. And I think it's just the beginning. I'm so proud of you, Maya. You're doing it." She set the phone down and looked out the window, the stars twinkling in the night sky. There was still so much she didn't know, so much she had yet to discover. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She was ready. Ready to embrace the changes that were unfolding in her life, ready to step into her true potential, and ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 4: The Dawn of Your Best Self. Maya woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through her curtains, the warmth of the morning wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. It had become her favorite time of the day, the stillness before the world around her began to stir. But today was different. Today, it felt like the world was waiting for her. She had come a long way since that first workshop, that moment when she had realized how much she had been holding herself back. Now, as she sat at her desk, notebook in hand, Maya felt a sense of purpose that had eluded her for years. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been days when doubt crept in, when the fear of failure threatened to consume her. But she had learned that fear was not the enemy. It was the absence of action, the refusal to move forward despite fear, that held her back. Maya had come to understand that growth wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment, it was about making the most of the moments she had. And she had decided to embrace those moments, no matter how small they seemed. It had been 3 months since she had started writing seriously, and her commitment had paid off. She had finished her first short story, a tale about a woman who, like herself, had spent years trapped by self-doubt, only to discover the strength within to change her life. Writing had become more than just an outlet, it had become a part of her, but as she looked at the finished pages, Maya knew that this was only the beginning. She wasn't done yet. There were still stories to tell, still fears to conquer, and still pieces of herself to uncover. With a deep breath, Maya closed her notebook and stood. The world outside her window was alive with possibility, and she was ready to step into it. For so long, she had been waiting for someone else to give her permission to chase her dreams, but she had learned that the only permission she needed was her own. The next few weeks were filled with small victories. Maya submitted her first story to a local literary magazine, something she had once thought impossible. She continued taking the writing class, where she grew more confident in her abilities. She had made new friends who shared her passion for storytelling, people who inspired her and pushed her to reach higher. She had also started a blog, where she shared her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and the lessons she had learned along the way. Every step felt like progress, even when it was difficult. There were still days when self-doubt threatened to creep back in, but Maya no longer feared it. Instead, she acknowledged it and kept moving forward. She had learned that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real, being true to herself, and showing up every day to do the work. One evening, after finishing an article for her blog, Maya sat in her favorite armchair, a cup of tea in hand. The soft hum of the city outside her window was a reminder that the world continued to turn, whether she was ready or not. But for the first time in her life, Maya didn't feel the need to rush. She had spent so many years chasing an ideal version of success, thinking that happiness was something to be earned. But now, she understood that happiness wasn't something you achieved, it was something you allowed yourself to experience. Moment by moment, she thought about the person she had been just a few months ago, the woman filled with self-doubt, the one who had held herself back from pursuing her dreams. That woman still existed, but now, she was no longer in control. There was no one moment of epiphany, no dramatic turning point. It had been a series of small decisions, choosing to write every day, choosing to take the writing class, choosing to submit her work, even when it felt scary. It was in those small choices that Maya had found her power, and now she was living it. Maya sat down at her desk, her fingers poised above the keyboard. She had a new story idea, one that had been floating in her mind for weeks. She wasn't sure where it would go, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she was writing. She was creating. She was living her dream. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from Emma. "How's everything going? Have you finished another story yet?" Maya smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. "I'm working on something new," she typed. "I'm not sure where it's going yet, but I'm excited to see where it takes me." "That's amazing, Maya. I'm so proud of you. You've come so far." Maya took a deep breath and let the words settle in her heart. She had come far, hadn't she? And she wasn't done yet. She returned her attention to the screen in front of her. She realized that the road ahead was full of possibility. She didn't know what the future held, but she no longer needed to. She had learned that the only thing she could control was the present moment, and she was determined to make the most of it. Maya paused, her fingers hovering over the keys, and smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt at peace. She was enough, just as she was, and the journey was only just beginning. The dawn of her best self had arrived.